Hey friends, hey family, let's talk about Bryan. Shall we? Yes, we shall. I think this is going to be a long going case before it goes to trial. I think that we're going to be watching this for a while. I think that more evidence is going to come out. The gag order is still in place, which is a good thing. I don't think a lot of people realize how great that is, that the gag order stays in place until there's a jury, because we really don't want all that information out and leaking out to people about him. I do think that he's going to have a fair trial. I do think that they are going to find him guilty, and most likely it's going to be death. That's my thoughts, because I think there's a lot of evidence against him. I also think that he has done more crime, like I've said that before, way in the very beginning. I think that he's a serial killer.
Courtroom in Idaho this week, the judge entering a not guilty plea on his behalf after Kohberger stood silent beside his team.
I don't think these four are just the only victims. I think there are several others, and I think they're going to be more closer to home. I think he analyzed BK, or whatever his name was, the guy who tortured and whatever, bondage and all that stuff. He really did like them. So I think he went for older women because he thought they're weaker, more valuable, more like looking for somebody to love them. And I think that's what he was doing.
Of lawyers, but now Kohberger's parents being called to testify in front of a Pennsylvania grand jury. Remember, that's where they're from. In the case of a missing woman, her name Dana Smither. For more on why his parents are testifying in this specific case, we want to bring into the conversation legal expert and friend of the program, Jacqueline Goodman. She joins us now. Jacqueline, good to see you. Thanks for being with us on this Thursday night. You were following this today. I think a lot of people who follow this case very, very closely are asking themselves, what's going on with this other entirely separate case of this missing woman, Dana Smither, and what do they potentially think Bryan Kohberger could have had to do with it?
Well, it's interesting. The police department has said that they have zero evidence. They did.
Who knows? Do I think Dana, the victim that they just found her body, do I think that he had something to do with that? Yeah. I think they found stuff in his room in Pennsylvania
County. According to the Stroud Area Regional Police Department, an autopsy was conducted on the remains that were discovered right near Park Avenue and the Interstate 80 on-ramp on April 27th. A portion of the remains were examined and identified as Smithers from Stroudsburg. Police say the investigation remains active. Anyone with information is urged to contact
Pennsylvania that leaked him to that murder, and that is the reason why he was called in, like a license. But I think there's evidence. I think there's a lot of evidence, and that's the reason why they're letting us know that there's other victims. I don't think it's just this one victim that now his parents have to go to the grand juror and talk about what happened. I mean, if they're going to the grand juror, having jurors actually look over the evidence to see if there's enough evidence to take this to trial, that means they have probable cause to, search and seize, which they did. I bet you they found a whole bunch of evidence, you guys. I bet you when they went for the search warrants, I think he thought he was going to be clever and smart and he was going to beat the system, so he didn't get rid of his trophies. He had enough trophies that it was enough evidence to leak them to all those crimes. That's what I think, you guys. I think that's going to be exciting at the same time, because it's like going, oh my God, this is real.
Qualify that statement. They said they have zero evidence linking that case to Bryan Kohberger, and yet you have a grand jury who is asking to hear testimony from his parents in connection with that case. And so, we're left to speculate because the grand jury connects together in secret, and we don't get to know what it is that they're thinking, and we can only speculate by virtue of the witnesses that are called. So the fact that his parents are being called in connection with that case on what looks like a murder that occurred about 30 miles away from the Kohberger home is certainly subject to speculation.
You know, Jacqueline, when you get a subpoena like the parents did, they tried to fight it. It was unsuccessful. Did they have any grounds to not comply with the subpoena in this? Can you just say, you know what? I'm not going to comply with this. We have no business with this. What are you even talking about? Was that on the table here?
They can't not comply. They'd be found in contempt. Even a suspect doesn't have a right not to appear before a grand jury, and you've seen that litigated.
There's more evidence and more information about Bryan K.
In sometimes very complex political questions. So, no, they didn't have a right not to appear before the grand jury and to testify truthfully. And they don't really even have a Fifth Amendment or other kind of privilege not to answer certain questions. They don't have a right to have counsel in the grand jury. And so it's really an opportunity, I think, for the prosecution to gain information about that case if they're so inclined, and it appears that they are.
So I want to put up this statement that we made here from the police department there in Pennsylvania looking into this, the Stroudsburg Police Department saying this. They're aware of the many currently reported news articles in which various media outlets have reported connections between Dana Smithers' missing person investigation and the Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger. The SARPD has no evidence, all caps, that Dana Smithers' disappearance is in any way, all caps, tied to Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger, to what you were alluding to right off the top there. So you're saying essentially that the Kohberger parents, they could have information, but it has nothing to do with what Bryan Kohberger allegedly did there in Moscow, Idaho.
Well, I mean, I think what's more important is that they're saying at this time they have no evidence, but the parents' testimony is not part of that calculation. And so it's possible that the parents' testimony before the grand jury changes that calculus and they may take a different tack. I think it's really an evidence gathering, a discovery process for the prosecution to have the parents come and testify at this grand jury. It's really it's a remarkable opportunity really for the prosecution to gain information and to sort of force people who otherwise may feel like they would rather not speak to law enforcement, force them to speak on the record on a case that they're investigating. And so we'll see whether or not there's developments in that cold case.
Yeah, I want to kind of go back to Idaho now and kind of do the flip side, because do you think prosecutors, now that this is going on there in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, do you think they can bring this up in his trial that's coming up in October? Hey, your parents, they were asked questions of in this missing woman's disappearance. We're going to talk about this in Bryan Kohberger's trial. He's stand accused of murdering those 4 University of Idaho students. Could that be in the mix here?
No.
You know, probably not. There's a general rule that evidence of prior misconduct is not admissible to prove conduct in conformity with this character trait, if you will, for criminal behavior generally, to prove conduct in conformity with that trait in another instance. So in the Idaho case with the 4 alleged victims, Bryan Kohberger is probably not going to have, at least as far as we can tell at this time, any questions or the witnesses on the defense are not going to have to deal with any implications based on what we know so far on this other cold case. Now that could change, of course, because it seems to be in the infancy of the investigation. But so far, no. There are exceptions to that general rule that keeps out that kind of called character evidence, which are things like identity, for example. If they want to prove motive, identity, modus operandi, there are many, many exceptions to the general rule. And so if we can show that a crime was committed in largely the same way, that might show some, for example, if there's sort of a mark of Zorro on the body in each of the instances, that might identify him to the case in chief. And so it really depends on the facts of the case and how they play out. But generally speaking, so far, no, just too speculative, too different.
Okay, but aside from the missing woman case that the parents have to testify in and are, could they just be brought to testify and be basically character witnesses to their son there in the trial in Idaho? Do you think that'll happen? Do you think he'll testify?
Either side can call the parents or anybody else to testify about the character, the lack of perhaps bad characteristics of Mr. Kohberger, character traits that might be inconsistent with the commission of this kind of a crime to prove his innocence in this case, or vice versa. The prosecution can call witnesses if they think they have evidence of character traits that would be consistent with someone who would commit this kind of crime. And, speculating about whether Mr. Kohberger is going to testify is really difficult, and often we don't know until the trial itself whether our clients are going to testify. Often they're the last witness to testify in a trial because that decision is made game time, really.
Yeah, because I was just lastly, it just seems that this reeks of, opening a can of worms if a police department nationwide thinks that relatives of a very high-profile murder suspect like Bryan Kohberger, any of his relatives, like his parents or even himself, could be basically, corresponding to or relating to some completely separate crime, completely separate case that they can go get a subpoena, bring them before a grand jury, and question them. You're saying that is just de rigueur. That is standard. They can do that, right? No?
No. They can't testify. They can't call the parents to testify that they were called as witnesses in another potential case. No.
Okay.
But the fact that the other case exists, the fact that there may be some evidence to link the two cases, maybe, and as to character traits that are relevant in this case in Idaho, yes.
There has to be evidence.
I think that the question of, if the question is whether the parents can come and testify about the fact that they were called as witnesses in this grand jury, absolutely not. No, they can't.
The grand jury
essentially.
is,
I should have started with this because this was the link
see if
there.
there's
The woman's
enough
disappearance,
evidence
Dana
to take it
Smithers in
to
Pennsylvania.
court.
It was close to the Kohberger parents' home there, and the school where Bryan Kohberger went.
And I know some people are going to think I'm crazy, but the reason why I get fascinated by things like this is because I don't understand how people could do things like this. How can anybody just take someone's life? It's hard for me to even just take stupid snails' lives or just stupid little bugs that people, they're not stupid, they're bugs. But it's like I can't look at one life better than the other. I have to look at it, all lives are equally. It's because we're all created that way. But, being said, do I think that I should be on trial for killing a snail? No. He needs to be on trial because what he did was wrong. And he took 4 lives in one night. He was too in and out that I think that everybody's going to be very shocked when the evidence comes out and they have evidence from basically seizing and going in there with the search warrant. And they got him. There's going to be so much, you guys. I think there's one more person besides this person. I have a really feeling that he did another person as well. Not just this person, the mother of a 6-year-old, but I think that he also killed somebody else in Pennsylvania besides this person in Pennsylvania. So I think it's going to add up to 6 people total. Love you guys and have a good one. And here, love you and be kind to one another, and God bless, and may the universe bring you presents.